Hello everybody and welcome back to this tutorial. And right now what we are going to do is we'll actually code a program that will help us to sniff the credentials from the FTP login. Now the FTP is really insecure. It sends the credentials, by which I mean username and password, in an unencrypted plain text. And all we have to do if someone is logging in from our local area network to the FTP is sniff for the packets and run our program, which will print out the username and the password. So let us see how we can do that. First of all, let us go to our Python programs, and before I do that, let me just enlarge this. Where is the enlarge? Okay, so it's here. Zoom in. Go to my local network programs and let us nano ftp sniff.py. There, all I need to specify is first of all the line that we always need, user being Python, and we will use two libraries, one of them which we encountered before, which is the opt parse library, which we will use to parse our actual available options, which we will specify then to the user. And we also need to import this kp.all library, which will help us to actually sniff the packets and print the username and password from the packet. So let us import it. So import opt parse, and from kp.all import all, which we specify by this star right here. And for now on, what we want to do is first of all parse our settings, see what we will need in order to run this program. So what we will need is basically just to specify the usage of the program itself, which will just be running over the program, and specifying the interface on which you want to actually sniff. So basically, if you type, let me just show you, if you just type ifconfig, you have multiple interfaces. In my case, I just have two, and one of them is the loopback interface, and I will specify this interface to be the interface on which I'm sniffing on. So you will most likely also have ETH0 if you're running on the actual Kali Linux machine. So let us go to the FTP sniff and see how our code will look like. We need to make, first of all, the main function. And in that main function, first of all, we want to parse the options. So we will use the usual thing, the parser, which will be equal to the opt parse dot option parser. This is something that we used before, so nothing really new for us. And in there, we want to specify the usage of the program for the actual user. So we can do it by this, specifying double quotes or single quotes and just printing usage of the program. So we close this, we can add in the new line, so backslash, we can use the backslash in order to specify the rest of the code in the new line, and all we have to add is another single quotes, and there we can specify the -e option to be the option for the actual interface. So we'll specify it like this, interface, and close it like this. So this will be the options that are going to be printed out to the user once they need to run the program. And all we need to do right now is actually add those options, which in our case is just the interface. So parser.add underscore option, and in the brackets what we need to do is specify the dash or just -i for the interface. We will select that destination to be equal to the actual interface itself, and then in the next line we can actually specify the type to be equal to the string, which we specify with this. Now why I'm not explaining this is something that we did previously at the beginning of the course, so this you should already be familiar with this code right here. And the help option will be specifying, for example, specify interface to listen on. So you can specify something like this. And all we have to do right now is add our usual line, which will contain options and arguments, and that will be equal to the parser.parseArgs. So parser.parse underscore args. We open and close the brackets, and right now we actually need to check if the user has specified this option. So if he didn't specify the option, what we want to print is we want to print our usage of the program. If they did specify the option, we want to continue into running our FTP sniffer. So We can check that as always with the if options.interface, since that is the actual destination that we specified as an option, is equal. We need to specify double equal, since one equal, if you remember, will be only giving the actual value to the variable. So we need to specify double equal in order to check if the options.interface equals to none. If they do equal to none, what we want to actually print is print the parser.usage. And once we print that, we can exit the program, since user didn't specify it correctly and needs to run it once again. In the else statement, we want to specify that conf.iface will be equal to our options that we actually used in the parsing part. So this is the options, the only option actually, options.interface, which we specified right here. And what we want to try is try to sniff for the packets with this command. So we will try and accept. Accept can be actually storing the keyboard interrupt. Since this is a sniffing program, we will sniff until the user actually wants to stop, which they can actually stop with just pressing Ctrl C, which will close our program correctly. So keyboard interrupt, and then we will exit the program. In the try statements, we will actually run a function which will be the sniffing function. So sniff, we want to sniff on the TCP port 21. Now the reason why we are sniffing on that port is because FTP is actually running on port 21. You can check that out on your Metasploitable, for example. If you open your Metasploitable and run an nmat scan or run any port scanner that we actually coded against the Metasploitable, you will notice that it is running FTP on port 21. And all the other machines and servers are also running the FTP on port 21. So we will use the filter to be equal TCP port 21. And the actual packet that we will prompt back to the function that we didn't code yet will be equal to the FTP sniff function. So we will code it just like this. And then we will code this function in the next lecture. So for now on, what we did is we coded our main function, which contains the available options, or just one option in our case. It checks if those option is specified once running the program. Else we gives the options.interface to the conf.iface, which stands for interface. Then we try to sniff for the packets on the TCP port 21 and process the packets back to the FTP function, which we will code in the next tutorial. If the user wants to stop, they can specify the keyboard interrupt or basically Ctrl C in order to close the program. So let us save this and we will continue coding in the next lecture. Hope you enjoyed it, and I hope I see you in the next tutorial. Bye.